My first marriage was arranged-ish. My husband's family made an arrangement with my father when I was 12, that I would marry their middle son who was 2 years older than me. When I was 18 and had finished school, I knew him already. His sister was my best friend and he was friends with my brothers. We never talked much until we made our engagement official, and he had paid me my mahr. And in the about 6 months between our engagement and our wedding we hung out and went on dates, talked on the phone, got to know each other personally. I grew to like him a lot, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that I loved him. I grew to love him eventually, and he was a very nice, caring, sweet guy and treated me well. He supported me going to university. We had a good life together, we loved traveling together, and we both loved photography. We had been talking about having kids when I was finished with university. We weren't married very long, only 2 years before he died in a car accident. I think we could have made things work with more time. Sex was fine, we were both virgins when we got married. I tried doing what I saw in porn, but it didn't work out too well, but like all things, we got better with practice. P.S. I am from Jordan, grew up mostly in South Korea in the US, Sunni Muslim at the time, now atheist. I currently live in Korea with my new husband, not arranged. I met him at a party, our 2-year-old son and our dog. Throw away because I'm a loser. Like a fool I opted for an arranged marriage on the rebound. The girl I was originally seeing was crazy. But something strange happens when you get rejected, more so than the hurt. You become incapable of making good decisions. Anyhow, was introduced to a girl. She had different interests, a different outlook on life, and didn't take too kindly to my casual humor. So like an idiot I got engaged to her. Over the course of the engagement I was really busy with work, so didn't see her at all. Then came the marriage. It was surreal. There I was sitting on stage with a girl I hardly knew getting married. Most of the people at the wedding were my parents' friends, etc. I hardly knew anyone there. Fast forward to the honeymoon. We were like awkward strangers. We actually never had sex on our honeymoon. Was the sex awkward? Absolutely. Fast forward 6 years later and we have a child. Did I make the right decision? If I wasn't a father I'd leave tomorrow. I wouldn't let my parents choose my socks, but I let them choose my life partner, the loser that I am. So why am I sticking around? To cut a long story short, I want my child to do well in life, so I am living an act. Do I have regrets? Don't we all? Am I a good husband? I never argue, never complain, and put on a smiling face. Have I ruined my life? Not totally. I earn quite a lot. And unlike the BS you hear in the movies, money gives you great options in life, and I try to enjoy as much of it as possible. From a Muslim standpoint, I had an arranged marriage, but it really wasn't all that arranged. I met my wife through a family friend. We were introduced, our families were introduced too, and we spent about a year getting to know each other. Both of us, at either point, could have decided we were not interested, but we fell very much in love and got married. We discussed sex, contraception, etc., prior to getting married, so it wasn't a foreign topic. When we finally ended up having sex, day after our wedding night, we were way too exhausted that night. We took our time and went slow. It was very much enjoyable for both of us, and we have sex nearly daily now, a year in. We were both virgins and had zero experience doing anything sexual with the opposite sex. Looking back now, I am really glad I got to experience all of that with her and only her. It makes it that much more special to me. My parents and aunt arranged a marriage for me and I traveled back to my country, met her once before the marriage. First night she was really shy and kept hiding under the blanket and pulling it away from me while giggling. Nothing happened that night. Then she got a call the next day from her mother and they kept talking for half an hour. It happened then later that night when we were in bed, innocently watching TV, then she looked at me and said maybe the first complete sentence, "I don't know what I'm supposed to do," in a nervous voice. So I laughed and played it funny, then started gently kissing, hugging, and joked a bit. Then 2 hours later we are doing it and now have 2 kids from her, and she turned 26 last month. Arranged isn't as bad as it sounds, but back in my place it's normal to have arranged marriages and even marriages without seeing the bride. Mine was great considering there are parents who wait outside the room to hear the daughter orgasm to make sure she's virgin. This all happened in April last year. My wife is from a Muslim country originally, but her family is from the capital and quite modern. She has relatives however from a smaller village who are not quite as modern. So one of her second cousins, son of dad's cousin, wants to get married because it is time already, and he wants children. His mom interviews a few girls but it took a while. Some of the girls she didn't like because they weren't traditional enough, and some of the girls' families didn't want because the guy's family was too strict, even for a small village. Things like the girl having to be Muslim, must wear hijab, pray 5 times a day, the whole ordeal. Finally they find a girl who suits him, his mom approves and girl's parents approve, so they organize the wedding for like 2 weeks after. Sadly, because of that I couldn't go. We live in Western Europe and I need to tell my vacation days in advance, at least more than 2 weeks, but she could arrange it with her work to go for the wedding. My wife told me about the wedding. It was super traditional Muslim wedding, which I would have loved to see because I have never been to one, although it was hard for me to understand a wedding without any alcohol. So the wedding happens and it ends early and everyone goes home to rest and sleep. My wife and his family, parents and sister, go to the hotel which is an hour away. Then my wife's dad gets a call. I should say before that my wife's dad is very well considered in his extended family because he has a very good job in the center and works with high-profile people, basically a very respectable man. It was maybe 1 a.m. and he gets a call from his older sister saying that he needs to go back to the village immediately. There is an emergency. Him expecting it to be about money, he gets asked for money quite often, demands to know what is going on. So here is the fun part. The groom was a very traditional Muslim man. He had never had a date, never gone out with a girl, and followed his religion in a very strict way. He had barely talked to women in the past. The bride has followed a similar path. So they finish the ceremony, they go to the room, and they realize they have absolutely no idea how to proceed. Like these people did not know how to have sex. They had never watched a porn film, they never had sex education, no one thought to tell them what they would have to do in bed. They are there wondering what to do now. So they call this aunt who is the eldest of the family to tell them what to do. But the aunt feels that a woman cannot possibly describe to a man how to have sex, that is so inappropriate, so instead she calls her younger brother, my father-in-law. My father-in-law doesn't want to hear about that crap, he is 1 hour away and it is really barely any of his business, it is late and he works the next day. Also there must be many others more suitable for that kind of thing. At this point my wife and her mom and sister are cracking up because they cannot believe this is happening in 2013, and the thing is no one expected this, otherwise they would have taken precautions. So my father-in-law tells them to try to find someone else and if not he will go, but thankfully they contact one of the guests who is a mullah, not sure I spelled that right, like a religious figure, who agrees to go and explain to the guy what to do with his wife so they can consummate the marriage. But it doesn't end there. Like a week later my wife comes and tells me that apparently something happened, because the next days the bride was seen walking funny, and apparently they had to contact a gynecologist because something had happened during the wedding night that actually hurt the poor girl. We never got to know what was it that he did, or they tried, that went wrong, or the outcome after. Keep in mind this is really embarrassing for them, so they tried to keep it as low as possible. We only found out because they called my father-in-law first to try to go talk to the guy. So obviously this was in a very rural area in a small village of a Muslim country, very hard to understand for many of us, but it is one of my favorite stories that I heard. I doubt this happens in many arranged marriages, but hey, it happened in at least once. Male Muslim here, I married less than a week ago and want to share. Hopefully someone manages to see this. Like a lot of the stories here, I guess it was technically arranged but not really. It was a rainy day when my family and I went to go meet my now wife and family-in-law. It wasn't a bad kind of rainy though, the drizzle was light, the air was crisp, and even though there were clouds everywhere it felt kind of bright. When we were welcomed in and settled there were a few silly little things I noticed that actually perked me up a little. A Nintendo DS on their TV stand, books like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings and Redwall in the shelves. A DuckTales DVD sitting on top of the player, the smell of fresh baked chocolate chip cookies wafting from the kitchen. Of course this didn't necessarily mean anything, as the items could have belonged to anyone else in the home. But they were all things that spoke to me, and unfortunately they are things that many Muslims I met never seemed to be into. If they weren't things that the girl I was about to meet was into, then at least there was someone in this place that I had a connection with. We were seated for what couldn't have been more than a minute or two before her mother got up to get some refreshments and I guess check on her. My mom got up to help, but I'm pretty sure it was because there was a chance she could scope out my wife. In the middle of our idle chit-chat with her brother and father I overheard her being introduced to my mother in the kitchen. My heart rate immediately went up because I knew she was going to be out soon and then all eyes would be on us. My mom was the first one to appear with a tray of South Asian sweets, then her mom with some appetizers, samosas and spring rolls if you're wondering, and finally her with a plate of cookies. She was beautiful. I was surprised my jaw didn't hit the floor when she walked through the door. I had to practically peel my eyes away from her. Obviously I wanted to show that I am a good Muslim and tried not to look at her for longer than what would be appropriate, but I found myself looking at her every chance I could because she's so beautiful. After being grilled a bit, the conversation switches to her and I'm ecstatic because I get a break and I can stare at her. Then we start getting into hobbies, likes, dislikes, and personality traits. They ask what I like to do in my free time. My response is a little vague because lots of video games isn't something they likely wanted to hear, but I do mention video games. Her mom groans that we would be a good match since she always has her face buried in her DS these days. We dive more into our personal hobbies and I bet I'm growing a dumb smile on my face because it's crazy how much we have in common. Her mom says something along the lines of how she still spends most of her time watching Disney and Nickelodeon. She gets a little annoyed and says that she doesn't spend all her time watching those channels, when I pipe in and mention that that's all I ever really watch as well aside from something like The Walking Dead. She smiles and turns towards me with a cute little half-sheepish smile on her face and we make real eye contact for the first time. It felt like an eternity and a millisecond all at once. We break it off and I can feel the heat emanating from my face. I'll fast forward since this is getting a little long. We get married. Our first moment of intimacy was probably after the wedding festivities had died down and we didn't have to meet and greet a billion people. During our honeymoon we went to an outdoor ice skating rink. She had never been before but I had, so I thought it might be fun for her to learn and me to teach. It's not very hard and she got the hang of it pretty quickly and we had a good time just skating with her holding onto my arm and chatting away. After a little bit we decide to sit on the benches at the side of the rink. I step away to get hot chocolates for us to sip while we relax. One of her friends had tipped me off beforehand that she really likes Christmas white peppermint drinks, so I made sure to get that and asked the guy to add extra whipped cream for her. I watched intently as she took her first sip and a smile drew across her face. I told her that I had heard that she really likes peppermint. She said that she did. I laughed and asked her if she also really likes whipped cream because it was all over her lips and nose. She giggled and rubbed her nose. I laughed and went back to people watching when she leaned over and kissed me on my cheek. I know a kiss on a cheek isn't much but I absolutely melted and was a little speechless while she just giggled at the whipped cream on my cheek and said that it should be gone now. Not one to miss a cliché opportunity, I let her know that she missed a spot and leaned in for our first kiss. It wasn't awkward, it wasn't strange, it was just an amazing moment. We might have had an arranged marriage but we also had the time to develop into a relationship. As for the sex, holy moly. I am a victim of arranged marriages. I used to live in the US and my parents are in India. My parents arranged the marriage, they saw the girl, liked her and family so fixed the marriage. They told me after they did everything. She was beautiful and educated so I didn't mind. I did talk to her on the phone multiple times before we got married but it wasn't the same. Fast forward first night after we got married, every time I wanted to touch her she moved away. I thought she is just scared. She was 4 years younger than me. So I didn't try much. Next day she said she is virgin and scared. So I thought to wait it out. I waited for a whole month as she said she will get intimate once she came to US to live with me. She did come here after a few days but left without even meeting me. Apparently she had a premarital affair. That was the reason she didn't let me touch her that way. After she went back she went MIA for 3 months. After that she emailed me to get divorced and asked a lot of money from me. So to answer your question, I don't know if actual sex was awkward but my whole arranged marriage was. I'm of Punjabi and Indian origin and have recently got into an introduced marriage. We dated for a few months before giving a decision. We're currently at the engaged phase. I agreed to have one purely out of respect for my parents, who have given everything for me and have never restricted me in the way I have seen other families do. The missus in question is the daughter of a friend of a brother-in-law of an aunt. We come from the same community with respect that our great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers shared a similar career. So far it has been awkward. Whilst we're born and raised in Canada, I would consider myself quite westernized when it comes to dating and relationships with the opposite sex, whilst she isn't. Pretty sure she's a virgin while I'm most certainly not. I was a bit of a man slut back in the day. The problem is I can't approach the topic with her because she seems very immature to these sorts of things. Every time I bring up kissing, which we have done, she goes into a fit of giggles, so there's no chance of a frank discussion about sex. She's a lovely person. We don't share the same interests or hobbies or even the sense of humor. My humor is quite crude and dark, possibly thanks to Reddit, but I do believe that it's good to have some sort of variety in a relationship. I do consider myself very lucky to have met my other half, so if I had the chance to go back to my previous promiscuous existence or choose her, I would choose her every time. In fact, part of the reason I said yes was to lock that down, so to speak. So, given that the wedding is not till April 2016 and I've broken it off with a sex buddy I had in the interest of being faithful, I'm resigned to 2 years of being intimate with my right hand. I've had to come to the conclusion that, although it's a huge part of an adult relationship, sex isn't everything.